Hello everyone, welcome back to another GoblinBlitz TCG video. Today I wanted to just go through a quick update on my progress on the game because I have been doing a lot of work on it in the past couple weeks. So I just wanted to make a quick video to update you guys on how the progress is going. Probably the most important change is the updates to the turn system. So I've been doing a lot of playtesting recently. I've tested the game out with a couple of friends, and I have made a lot of progress towards what I think will make sense for the rules and the overall gameplay. The biggest thing that I've decided to do is to make combat into a joint turn essentially. It's a mix between your turn and your opponent's turn. Essentially, the first player will have their planning phase, which is when they get to draw their card, untap their workers, and play cards from their hand like basic tactics, and play monsters onto the board. When they're done, they'll pass it over to the second player for their planning phase. Same thing. And the main difference now is that instead of each player having their own combat step in their turn, once player 2 is done with their planning phase, it will move to a joint combat phase. Combat will consist of essentially what I'm calling 3 battles. So during the first battle, player 1 will have their combat phase. They get to activate each of their monsters that they have on the board once, and an activation could consist of moving, attacking, or using an ability. Then player 2 will get a chance to do the same before moving on to the next battle. It will basically follow the same process for the second battle. The only difference is that a monster cannot take an action that it already has taken this combat. So basically, if you had a monster that you decided to attack with during the first battle, you have to do something else with that during the second battle. And the reason why there's 3 battles is because the most you can do with a single monster is 3 actions. So by the time you finish battle 3, you should have no more actions to activate. Okay, next up we have some rules changes. So first off, and this isn't a huge deal, but I definitely wanted to make a note of it because I realized I haven't really talked about this in a while, and that is that there's no more blitz mechanic. I think I originally mentioned that it's not going to be a main part of the game, but now I've sort of moved towards not including it at all. And the reason for this is just I didn't really feel that it was necessary. It seemed like just an unnecessary complication for the rules, so yeah. If you don't know what the blitz mechanic is, you don't need to worry about it anymore. The second thing, and this is big, is tactics can now be played face down as workers, which is essentially what you tap to generate resources to play your cards. Now, the reason I decided to change this is because originally it had felt like you really were kind of discouraged from using your tactics deck. Especially in the Rebel starter deck, it seemed extremely beneficial to only focus on drawing monsters. So the idea that monsters are the only ones you can play face down to generate resources was just making it really unbalanced, because not only do you want monsters so that you can progress the game and attack your opponent, you also want them so that you can progress the game by playing more cards. So it just sort of fed into itself to where you pretty much always wanted to be drawing monsters, and it made your tactics deck essentially useless. Now that I've changed it to where tactics can be used as workers, the game feels a lot more balanced. And the next thing is that there is currently no summoning sickness, which is basically just a rule that means your monsters can't attack or take actions the turn they enter. A lot of TCGs have this to limit the effects of explosive turns, so you can't just immediately play a bunch of monsters and then destroy your opponent before they have a chance to respond. But I was thinking, since combat has this back and forth to it, that it's not really necessary, since sure, if you're going first, you may be able to attack your opponent before they can do anything, but if you're going first, you also had your planning phase before your opponent had theirs, so they still would have had a chance to respond to any monsters you played during your planning phase. So I actually think it's decently balanced without a summoning sickness rule. So I'm going to keep this rule for now, although it could be subject to change in the future. Okay, another one, and this is mostly a big thing for the regime deck, and it's a rework of the scavenge mechanic. This is one I've been trying to fix for a while, just since the game revolves around attacking your opponent's deck and forcing them to put cards into their graveyard. It just didn't really make sense for the cost to be removing cards from your graveyard. Because especially in the late game, you're going to have plenty of cards to remove. So it's basically a non-cost that just allowed you to use these abilities freely, and it sort of took away all the synergies and intentionality that I had planned for the regime deck. So I decided to fix this by changing Scavenge into an ability that allows you to capture cards with the monster, but it only works for cards that enter your graveyard during your own turn. So this negates the ability to capitalize on cards that your opponent has put into your graveyard for you by attacking. And now it's also made it more interesting where the abilities tend to scale with the amount of cards you scavenged. So it also sort of unlocks more potential for these abilities. Because, previously you could only heal 4 damage from an unstoppable mutant. But now if you scavenge like 5 or more cards, you could heal even more. Alright, next up is a big update on the art. I've been making a lot of progress towards actually finishing all the drawings that I need for the 2 starter decks. And I have made some changes to the actual monsters that have been included in the decks. Which you see here, like some of these monsters I bet you probably don't recognize because they're new additions to the starter decks that I just recently made the artwork for, and I thought they would have a cool place in the deck. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy seeing all this cool new artwork that I've been making, and I'll definitely try and keep you posted on that in the future. It's definitely one of my favorite parts of the game to work on. Alright, next up we're going to go through some deck changes. So first up for the Rebel deck, I have cut Warcaller since, we're not using the Blitz mechanic anymore, and it didn't seem super useful in playtesting either. Plus, I didn't have an artwork for it, so yeah, I really didn't feel too bad about cutting this one. Another one, this one I'm a little bit more kind of sad about cutting, and that's Gash. He was originally intended to be one of the main characters in the game, one of the Rebel leaders, and I may still try and include him, but I felt like it wasn't necessarily necessary to include all the Rebel leaders in the starter decks. I feel like it would be cool for some of them to be more like chase cards in the actual set once I complete that. So yeah, it just didn't feel like it was that necessary to have him in the starter deck because his ability and his stats, being a 7 cost, it didn't really fit well with the Rebels strategy, which is more about getting out a bunch of small monsters. So I ended up cutting him from the deck. And to replace these, we have added a couple new cards. So you guys may have seen Spearbearer in the last video, and I know I said I wasn't going to add any of those cards to the starter decks, but I decided to test them out, and Spearbearer actually fits perfectly in the Rebel deck. I mean, it gives them options in terms of range, allows you to hit some more faraway monsters early in the game, and it's also just a 2 cost, so it's easy to get out early on, which is exactly what the Rebel deck is trying to do. And now, also playing into that, we have Fuzzmuncher Swarm. And this one isn't a Rebel, but honestly, the Rebel deck doesn't have a lot of typo synergies. It's more just about filling up that full team. And I try to do that so that you could expand it with non-Rebel cards and still maintain those really cool synergies. And Fuzzmuncher Swarm exemplifies that perfectly. It's just an aggressive 1 cost that shuffles back into your deck when it dies. And yeah, even though its range isn't too good, I think it'll still be really useful for the Rebel deck. So you can just get it out for 1, and it pressures your opponent a lot because it can deal 3. And they still have to, invest that damage to get rid of it, even though it only has 1 HP. They still have to choose to attack it, so it's just really annoying for your opponent to deal with, and that's exactly what the Rebel deck is trying to do. Alright, next up for the Regime deck, I actually only swapped out 1 card. And I did make a ton of changes to the Regime deck, because, I changed the whole Scavenge ability and such, but in terms of actually removing and adding cards, there was only 1. I took out Jewel-Laden Noble, because with the Scavenge rework, there's no more sacrificing a monster, so a monster with a death ability wasn't really necessary. And I also felt like it just wasn't that good in my testing, so yeah, I decided to cut that one, and I added a card called Clay Golem. And this one isn't in that Regime blue color. It will be for the actual starter deck, but this is just the regular version I made. And this one might need some tweaks to the stats to make it viable, but it's just intended to be a high defense monster in the early game to help you stave off some of that aggression from the Rebel deck. And I think it fills that role pretty well, being a 3 cost 2/8. Alright, now one final thing that I'm really excited about is that I ended up doing a collab with a fellow TCG creator, Legends of Earth. Unfortunately, I don't think they have a YouTube channel. I would totally love to promote that if they did, but they're just in the Epic Underworlds Discord, so if you're in there, definitely check them out. And they just do a lot of really cool art, so we ended up doing an art swap, and they gave me this amazing artwork for my game. They decided to call it Sun Color Dragon, and I think that's honestly a very fitting name. And this is going to be one of those desert monsters for the main set. It won't be included in the starter decks, unfortunately, although the trend of me saying that and then actually including them in the decks, so you never know. But yeah, I'm just really excited about this. It looks so sick in the template, and the ability is still a work in progress, but the goal here was to try and build up to some lizard synergies, because we already have Breakwalla that has a ability where it deals damage to adjacent monsters. So I feel like that could be kind of a trend with the lizard creatures and maybe the desert monsters in general that could contribute towards some synergies later on. Up here, I do have a screenshot. I was doing some playtesting on Tabletop Sim. The game is not publicly available on Tabletop quite yet, but I will be looking forward to setting that up once I finish the decks. With that said, that's pretty much the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.